Hello Reds, welcome along to All for United.
Hello and welcome to All for United with me, John Foster, MUFC. Cracking show lined up tonight. Nat, Rich, how you guys doing?
Good. Can't wait for this one.
I'm good, thanks, guys.
It's Thursday, which means it's Transfer Thursday. So throughout the summer, any bit of transfer news that we hear throughout the day, throughout the week, is going to be on here. We've got loads to talk about there. Loads of rumours about players leaving. A few rumours coming out this week about players who are potentially on the move. Not necessarily to United, but some of them might fit the mould and some may be. But first, before we start talking about that, I've got to mention a little bit about Toone and Team GB. So let's kick off with that one then. So Nat, Toone has had such a great season. Wasn't really any surprise, was it, for yourself there, Nat?
No, I'm happy. I'm happy for her. She deserves it. I think she got 10 goals, 7 assists. She's lit the world, set the world on light for Man United women, and I just think it's what she deserves. I'm happy for her. I know there's controversy in other areas, but it's what it is. For me, I think it's right that Toone got on the plane. Yeah, it's a reserve, but other than that, I can't really say anyone else from our team really, deserved it. She deserved it the most. Maybe Leslie would have got in if she'd stayed fit, but that's for a different day. They're all young still, and I think all the ones who've been called up to the Lionesses still got a long way to go.
I was going to mention that, Nat. Is it possible that one of any other player could have got in there from United? But I don't think so. I think at the start of the season, maybe you could have argued maybe Amy Turner, but I think over the space of the season, possibly not. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think Amy still more than Millie, but obviously it looks like it's sailed for Amy in a way, and they're looking to bring in youth. But yeah, you could maybe shout for Amy, but I just think it's too little defenders. And yeah. Obviously, it was more Beth Mead and Jordan Nobbs that everyone's booting off about. So, I suppose, Rich, what do you think of Toone getting in? But then I suppose those two missing out, and Greenwood as well.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. I say shocked personally. I mean, it's such a small squad that you get to pick from. Mead and Nobbs, don't think they did massively shock me in a way because there is such a small squad and there's a lot of quality, particularly up front. Lauren Hemp, I think, now has really made the kind of left wing spot her own that Beth Mead kind of had. And I think really you're probably not taking more than one player in each position and then just having a lot of versatile players, which is what you've got in, your Rachel Daly's, Georgia Stanways, etc., which is probably why they're in the squad. Nobbs didn't always play regularly this season. She was quite far down the sort of minutes list for Arsenal. And obviously I think midfield was always the strongest position when you looked at the other countries as well. Not just Nobbs, not just Jill Scott and Kira Walsh, but obviously Hayley Ladd, could have been in there. Sophie Ingle is in there. Kim Little, Caroline Weir. I'm sure Erin Cuthbert was close as well. So there was a lot of competition. I'll be honest, the one that did shock me the most was Greenwood. Just because I think she's had a very good season. She has played consistently. She's played every week. I think almost what maybe hurt her was the fact that actually she's become a centre-back almost now for City. And obviously you've got Steph in there, you've got Millie Bright, you've got Leah Williamson. You probably weren't ever going to see more than that. And I think if you were taking someone solely as a left-back, Demi probably is more of that these days, even though she hasn't really played. She's probably the more defensively solid of the two. I think Greenwood has a lot more to her overall game in terms of her set pieces, her delivery, her attacking ability. But I can understand every decision. I looked at it, I suppose, rationally in terms of, at the end of the day, people say, managers don't know what they're doing. Hager Risa is a top coach. She's won every major tournament she could have done as a player, so she knows exactly what it needs, and I'm sure it wasn't easy. People say England sometimes value experience a bit too much. I don't necessarily disagree with that. There is always a lot of experience in the squads. Obviously, Karen Bardsley and Jill Scott and people like that haven't always played regularly. But we'll see what happens. But not many of them shock me, to be honest, just knowing the sort of dynamics. And Toone is great, the youngsters on the backup list. I think Nat's right. I think Leslie, if she'd had a full season, could have even been in there with Chloe Kelly injured. I think Leslie could have actually been in the squad, but, that's just how it's worked out. But it's good to see Toone in there. I think Millie Turner, don't think she had... I don't think she was as good this season as last. That's just my personal view. I know obviously she got her England call up this year, and maybe at the start of the season that was deserved. But I think Lotte at Arsenal has kind of overtaken her in terms of her performances the second half of the season. So I think the backups are about right. It's good to see the young players in there because they're the ones that are going to learn from it the most, because they're probably the ones that are going to go to the Euros in 12 months' time.
I just want to put one point. John Farrar says we get nowhere in tournaments because, 11 players from City. And I'm not just saying that, but I just think, mix it up. I think Karen Bardsley, Jill Scott don't play. That's why they're just getting in. And I get what you said about experience, but for me, it's not the one. I think if you rely on experience, you know what they're going to bring. They've already done it in the World Cup. It's time to add some spice, I would say. Youth FC. Put in Toone, because even when England played versus Canada, Toone came on and it changed up a bit. It looked a bit of energy, and I'd like to see more of Toone. Like you said, Leslie had played. Definitely, I would have had her in over Ellen White. Leslie was on a great form. People saying Cuthbert, young player, mix it up. To be honest, even LJ. I know LJ didn't play as much, but something like that. Ebony, fast pace with these old players, not in a horrible way. You know what you're going to get. I've already seen it. I've seen the story. But it's England. Well, it's not even England. It's Team GB, but it looks like England. And, there are good players. Caroline Weir's a good player, deserves it. I've got a little conspiracy about City and why Greenwood didn't get in, ex-United captain, rather than this and that. But that's my little thought. They keep each other tight, the City lot. They run it, but we'll see when they start getting dropped what happens. I think Serena's going to be the one to drop them. And in terms of Hegarisa, I've seen her name bandied about, but I think the fact that she's had to bring back old guard, for me, that's not the one. And people are saying her for our manager. I think if you're not going to balls to drop someone, I don't want you as a Man United manager, really. Rich, what do you think?
I think the KB one's interesting because I'll be honest, for a while I thought Roebuck and probably McIver were the sort of nailed on picks. But again, I can understand the rationale even if I disagree with it, because she hasn't put, well, I mean, obviously she's playing now out in the US, but that's kind of the first time she's been playing regularly now pretty much since the World Cup 2 years ago when she got injured. But like you said, with goalkeepers particularly, unless you get injured, the other isn't really going to play. So I think the rationale behind it, obviously with Roebuck probably being the number one, is it's her first major tournament. You've got someone next to her that has been to so many World Cups, so many Euros. But I think probably the most important thing for her is Karen Bardsley's someone that she's worked with every single day for the last 5 years. And I'm sure they probably value that with England, that kind of consistency. At the end of the day, like I said, you don't just pick players for the sake of it. She wouldn't have just picked KB over McIver or Hannah Hampton because she plays for Man City, because she doesn't actually anymore. There will have been a very good reason for it. I'm speculating, obviously, based on what I believe and what I think in terms of obviously the working relationship Roebuck and Bardsley have had over the years. But But yeah, and at the end of the day, she is a pretty solid, dependable, experienced head if anything did happen to Roebuck, and you've got Sandy McIver to come in for one if anything did happen. So, and she's a very talented young keeper as well, and we're pretty spoiled in that area now for someone like Hannah Hampton to not even make it because she's another excellent young goalkeeper. But yeah, it was always going to be tough, to pick 18 players, even just from England, would have been tough. And I think, like I said, if Chloe Kelly had been fit, she would have been in there as well. So it's tough, but it's what we want. We've got a lot of good players, so there was always going to be some good players be left out.
Can I just bring up Toone just one last time before we do move on? Obviously, me and Nat always rave about Toone, and everybody else at All for United pretty much raves about Toone, which just sounds like a bit of a neutral. Now that you've seen a progression since the first season to this season, but how well do you think she's actually done this season? Because a lot of United fans have put her in the top 3 players of our season this season, which is really high if you compare like the competition that she's had in this squad. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
I think when you're a young player, you've just got to take the chances that are offered to you. I really liked Toone when she was at Man City. She was only like 17, 18, and she was always kind of on the fringe. They were Man City back then. That was when I think it was the year they won the league that she was starting to kind of break in, and she was getting the last sort of 5-10 minutes of games, a little bit like now you see with a Jess Park or a Carrie Jones at Man United kind of thing, and you could always tell she was a little bit better than that. And obviously when she went to United, she did very well in the Championship, but it's always a big step up. And I openly said to Nat, because I don't think she was hugely involved last season, it was kind of Zellum, Grunen, Hayley Ladd, that was kind of your midfield three, and Toone wasn't always in there, and then you went out and you signed Staniforth, and you signed Fuso, and you signed Russo and Heath and Press, and I thought, if she wasn't getting in regularly last season, was she going to this season? And she got the opportunity because Staniforth obviously was injured at the start of the season. The Americans took a little bit of time, they were quarantining. I think Alessia came over late. Fuso was injured. So it actually presented her that opportunity early on where she had to start. There was no other there was no other kind of way for Casey to sort of line up. You had to have Toone in the team. But she took her chances. She scored goals. She was creating chances. She was playing well. And it's like with anything, once you start playing well, you're very hard to drop. And, I don't think Toone has been dropped that often, if at all, this season. So she's done well, and she's still young. She's still developing. And, I'm not saying she's lucky, but she was presented an opportunity that maybe wouldn't have been there if Staniforth had been fit or someone else had been fit earlier in the season. But she's taken that and she's keeping those players now out of the team, and she's going from strength to strength. She's made her England debut, and I think if she carries on like she is, she's probably there to stay. Yeah,
I have to agree on that as well. So at the start of the season, obviously, Katie Zellum was off with COVID, so that kind of consolidated a place in there. And even towards the end of the season, where Zellum was playing a lot more, Ladd was playing a lot more, and Jackie was playing a lot more, and Staniforth was playing. Even then, Toone was still on the pitch, were playing out wide as well, wasn't she? So just keeping her on the pitch was really, really important to Casey. Just before we move on to transfers, just want to hear your thoughts, Rich, on United's season as a whole. Obviously, just rounding it up a little bit. Just what are your thoughts on kind of how it ended, and also just with Casey leaving as well?
Yeah, it was really strange actually, because I think at the start of this, obviously, the aim for United this season was to get close to that top three and in it if things went their way, because they were quite far off last season. But I don't think that was ever a massive issue. First year in the WSL to be as far off as they were from three teams that have been doing it for nearly a decade. I think this year, if you kind of flipped it and United had a bad start and then came good and ended up a point behind at the end, you'd have probably said, okay, they've done all right. I think it was the fact that actually they were kind of victims of overachieving, really, because nobody realistically, I don't even think Man United fans realistically expected to be where they were at Christmas, to be top of the league, to be unbeaten in their second season in the WSL. You probably did look at it and think, yeah, they're maybe in a little bit of a false position. The drop away was very drastic. They did lose games that they shouldn't have for one reason or another. But I think it just shows. I think they did do a good job because they could have easily been in there, and I don't think many people in their second season would have expected United to be in the top three. Against three mega established teams. They've got absolute. All three of them, international superstars, players that have been doing it for years and years, and United are still very much growing. So I know there was a lot of frustration among United fans. I know Casey said it was a failure, but I think there was a lot of good. I think they did so well for so long, and I can see why the disappointment is there because of the fact that they dropped off rather than came on strong at the end. But I think there's a lot there to build on. Obviously, the team will change. There's, like you said, all sorts of speculation at the moment, but that's natural. Everyone's team will change. City, Arsenal, Chelsea, their teams will change. So it's just about going out there and getting the next thing right because they're clearly not far off. You take just one of those results, the Brighton game, the Reading game, and they're there. They're top three and in the Champions League. So, I think for their second season to not be that far off, I think is actually a very solid achievement from United this season.
Can I just add?
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think Casey overachieved. She took us there. Like you say, it's so close. We talk about budgets and how it's not that close and all that. They've got a bigger budget than us, yet we were sitting top. For me, I think it was silly mistakes, really. You look at that Chelsea goal that Frank Kirby scored. It was just a ball over the top. You look at some of the Reading second goal was a free header. Even Toone early in that game hit the post. Things like that. Fine margins of difference. And now Casey's gone. And obviously they'll bring in someone, but I can see a drop off. I'm sorry, I can't. And it's expected. The foundation is there. The development team is good, but how much of it is the team's doing well, or is it that Casey's pushed them there, and then now potentially you're going to see the level that they invest, and if other teams overtake us in investment, Everton, Leicester, whatever, then they will overtake us in the league, if you get what I mean. Whereas Casey's pushed us so far to basically sit above teams that have invested more, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, do you want to jump on that one, Rich? Because I'm thinking to myself, but you just ended your little comment on the previous time we spoke about we're not that far off, and I agree with that. But now that Casey's left, and now that we're going to have a wholesale of changes, potentially we are far off. And there's people now in the comments saying that we'll be looking to get fourth next season. We had a few other fans on the show over the past week, and I'm kind of leaning towards them. We shouldn't be, and this is us being quite sceptical now, which is unlike me. But I do think we were so close last season, and we didn't. We were so close, and now we've got a manager changing, potentially like between 6 and 10 players going. It's a massive step, isn't it, Rich?
But it's not even the players that are going to go, because I know we're going to talk about them. But she got so much out of people like Leah, Leslie, Toone. Is the new manager going to get those performances out of those players?
I think Leah and Alessia particularly are just naturally gifted players. I think Alessia particularly is still very young, and I think she will be a huge player for United for years to come. There probably is going to be a change around in the attack. I mean, the Americans haven't been confirmed as going back, but judging by their social media posts, they seem to think they are. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation about Lauren James, but until that's, she's under contract, so United don't have to accept a bid, and I'm sure they certainly won't accept anything, below what they value her, because she's a top talent. But I still think you've got a good foundation there with Russo, with Galton, with Toone. If they find a number 9, which is probably still the issue. Still don't think they really had that one last season. But at the end of the day, a new manager can freshen things up as well. There's still a lot of players there that were with United in the Championship. I'm not saying they're Championship players, because players like Amy Turner and Millie Turner and Katie Zellum, etc., they're not. They played in the WSL before United. Amy Turner did play for England very, very briefly, and Zellum's obviously been around that setup this year, but maybe you need actually someone fresh, like you said, that's going to come in and maybe ruffle things up a little bit. I've seen United fans say Casey was too loyal to certain players. She wouldn't drop certain players. A new manager that comes in and has no affiliation to them, that's not worked with them, might come in and shake it up. But I think there's a really good foundation there, not just with those, but with the centre-backs, Amy, Millie, with Ona obviously there. Mary's not a top-class goalkeeper, but she's a solid goalkeeper. You could do a lot worse in terms of a foundation. Jackie Groen and Hayley Ladd, they're good players. They're really good players. They just need to... At the end of the day, your aim is always, whoever leaves, you bring in players that are better than the ones that are going. So, if you lose Jess Sigsworth, if you lose Jane Ross, whoever that is, you find players that are better. And there are players out there that are better than some of the ones United will lose. Yeah, the Americans, they're world class, but realistically, that was always going to happen. City are going through the same with Mewis. I think those clubs always bought them. I think they always knew it was going to be a year. So I'm sure there's been plans in place for those going. What they need to do is get the manager sorted first. There will be things going on. I know fans are panicking that, players won't get signed, but there'll be a lot going on. There'll be a lot of people at the football club, and not just United, but at Arsenal, at Birmingham, and I went through this with Sheffield United last year. Every club always has its players and its targets, and there'll be a lot of people at every football club going through that, whether the manager's there or not. You just have to. People will say, well, how can you sign players without a manager? But you've just got to, because if you don't do it now, you won't get the players that you want. Those lists will have been drawn up months and months ago, maybe even last summer, certainly from January onwards. So I don't think it's crisis mode. I think United have got a great foundation of youngsters. Kirsty Hansen as well, I think is another really talented young player. I like the midfield. I like Hayley Ladd. I'm a big fan of Hayley Ladd. I'm a big fan of Jackie. And I think Alessia will keep growing. I think Leah is there. I think Leah's at her peak now. So, yeah, I think if they just get a few, I think if they get that sort of 4 or 5 in, to replace the sort of first teamers that might go, the Americans, LJ, etc. Yeah, I'd be surprised if United weren't still in around that top 4 next season.
Can I talk about LJ? So yeah, she's on the list, as everyone knows. Chelsea want her, and we've seen a sort of rumour that Viv isn't staying, and then there was a talk of a swap deal with Nikita Paris. Not that I know there's a couple of people who would want Nikita Paris at Man United. I'm not one of them. But Beth England, Guru Wrighton, Beth England didn't get into the Team GB. She would probably be disappointed since she had such a great season. Then she stepped up into this year and it's not really the same. Could you see United maybe doing a swap deal like that? Have you heard anything about the LJ deal? I mean, I've only heard that they're negotiating, but like you say, for me, I think United need to be asking for a world record fee, or we'll take 2 or 3 of yours. What's your thoughts, Rich and John?
I mean, swap deals are hard to do. I know they sound really simple. It's just, okay, well, you want this player, we want that player, but they are quite complicated. I'd certainly be asking, yeah, because Chelsea have got Sam Kerr, they've got Pernille Harder, they've got, Erin Cuthbert, they've got Guru, they've got Beth. And obviously, if LJ goes in there, they'll have her as well. And obviously, they've got Fran Kirby, who's been unbelievable. So it's very hard to see who's going to go in there and shake that front three up of Fran, Sam, and Pernille, because they've been unbelievable. And like you say, if LJ goes in there, she's going to get game time as well. So, yeah, I probably, if I was Man United, I'd be more pushing for Beth than Guru. I mean, Guru's a brilliant player. But Beth England is a number 9, and I think that's what United need. I haven't heard anything to suggest that's going on. I think with LJ, I haven't heard much with the Leon stuff. I know, obviously, Leon, they were meant to be talking about it. Everything I've heard has kind of pointed to Chelsea negotiating and trying to do a deal. I haven't heard a huge amount about Leon, but, I'm sure if you asked a French journalist, they probably might have heard differently. But you're right. United, they've got no pressure on them. They don't need the money. And she will command a big fee because she's one of the top young players in the world. And Man United know Chelsea have got a lot of money because they went out and broke the transfer record last year. So I think it will probably happen because I don't think a club is going to keep a player that wants to go, whether for whatever reason, if it is homesickness or whatever. But if United don't get a deal that's good for them, I wouldn't let it go personally, and I would either be asking for a lot of money or I would be wanting a player in return. I'd be pushing for Beth more than I think Guro is a better footballer. She's a fantastic talent, but I think for what United needs, I'd be wanting Beth England.
Both.
If you want to get greedy, then yeah.
Both.
Shall we talk about the outs then first? So obviously we saw something on Twitter a few days ago now when we've waited for this show. It's off a Twitter account. It's only got 1,500 followers, but it was quite exciting. It brings us stories, it brings us rumours, and it brings us some information as well that we may not know. So the account is called Soccer Donna, and basically they put a little tweet out, nicely designed, where you got 6 Man United players who are rumoured to be leaving. I think 5 of them are possibly likely. I'm not too sure about the 6th one, but we'll go through them all. But what was really interesting is it's actually said their valuation as well, which is something that we don't see much of in the women's game, especially publicly anyway. So we'll start off with the most expensive player. So we mentioned LJ. It actually was quoted 150,000 for LJ. So we spoke about swap deals and this, that, and the other. But I don't know where they got this kind of valuation from. But Rich, I mean, do you ever hear much about like the values of players at all in this kind of situation?
Not massively. I mean, obviously last year with Penile, I don't think there was ever a actual fee mentioned. It was obviously said that it was a world record, but that's, you're talking hundreds of thousands tops in the women's game. It's not the multi-million pounds of the men. I don't really know where Soccer Donna get those fees from. I don't know whether they use like a data cruncher or something like that, because a lot of I've seen that graphic, the likes of, I'm sure we'll speak about, Sigsworth and Kirsty Smith, etc. I mean, they're out of contract, so you're not going to be getting 20, 30,000 for players that are out of contract. So I don't know, like I said, whether it's just like a, almost like you see on Football Manager kind of thing, where it just gives them a value. I think with LJ, roughly, I'd probably try and push for a little bit more, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was around that. But yeah, like I think if you're going to lose LJ, you've got to try and get a player, I think. Unless they get a massive, massive fee, and you're talking up there with what they would have paid for Harder last year. You can go out and do a lot with that in women's football. But I definitely want a player. But in terms of the fees, you don't hear a lot. Clubs don't. I mean, some clubs don't even announce how long contracts are. Yeah. Arsenal are one of those clubs. They never. United are actually quite good with that, to be fair. They'll always say it's a year plus a year or 2 years plus a year. Arsenal, you never get that. Man City are quite good with it. So yeah, there's still a lot of secrecy around. But I think you just don't hear about the fees because they're just generally quite insignificant. A lot of transfers that do happen, it will be a few thousand. The ones like Harder, like even Sam Kerr I think she was out of contract, so you're talking wages, but I don't think there was ever a transfer fee. And they're just still, you see the FIFA reports every year. It's like 8-9% of transfers have a transfer fee or something, and everything else is free. So they're not quite, transfer fees are not quite there with in the women's game yet.
Just before we move on to the next players, Nat, what are your thoughts on that? Like, because I think that's part of the game, isn't it? Like, how much can we get so and so for? How much can we get so and so for? How much will this person go for? Now we can use that money for this player, but we don't really see much of that, do we? And obviously, coming from the men's game, I think it's something that's lacking.
Yeah, I think we need more of it. I think they sort of just said that they've figured it out through a database, sort of like probably like Football Manager. They've based it on how old that person is and the potential and how many games they played over the season. Obviously they're not saying that's it. They're not saying that this is the money they're going to make. They just sort of want to, I suppose, create a talking point. And for me, I think you need to be looking at, if you're selling LJ, I think you need to be looking at like, and Rich might laugh now, but over 500,000. That's how much I'm being said. I want that much. I want like half a mil, maybe even a mil. I don't know. I know Rich was probably telling me wrong, but I heard Sam Kerr's on about a mil, or that's how much they spent to get her over. So I know Sam Kerr's done it, but for me, I think LJ can be one of the best players in the world. And if we are going to sell her, if we're not getting 2 or 3 players, or at least Beth England, I want him looking at half a mil, and then you can go out and you can properly get in the good players, because a lot of players are under contract anyway. There's players in Barcelona that, are really good, but they're under contract. Even players that want to leave Barcelona, they're on 3-year contracts because that's how they run it, and that's the best team in the world. And if we want to be like them, we need to be getting the money in and spending the big money. Casey talks about Sandy Baltimore and this is a player and that and another, but she's under contract. Paris look like they're in a bit of turmoil, but then we're in turmoil. So to make her come to join us, you need to pay the money. You need to pay her out of contract and pay her big wages. And I'm not trying to say we only want players to come on big wages, but the best players are going to command the best wages. So everything needs to sort of go up now from where we're at championship level, kind of spend whatever, this and that. Then we got about 40k or something for Greenwood or something like that, but apparently that was a record at the time. But I think LJ, year on the contract, maybe even a year plus another year, who knows? We need to get big money. Or I would just say, Casey might be one of these that don't want to, if you've got an unhappy player, this and that. I think the other manager might be a bit more like, well, she's my player and I'll make her happy. And it's all about this COVID, I think, as well. A lot of people are unhappy. I've seen quotes from Jackie going, it's made me realise this and that, and I want to be close to home. But no one could do anything last year. So when you are locked down, it probably is hard. And, all you do is go to work. I found it hard. But, everything's opening up now. The vaccines are on offer for everyone. You can go wherever you want, sort of, hopefully, again. So for me, we need to show, because a lot of stuff has come out, bad news stories about us. So that means you have to work even harder now to make sure that we are serious about this project. They have to show it for the men's team, and to be honest, they have to show it for the women's team because they treated the women even worse.
That's a whole different subject there. But anything you want to touch on there, Rich, before we move on?
No, I agree. I don't think you'd get 500,000. I can understand why you'd try and hold out. I think with LJ, it gets to a point. If they can't do a deal, if United are not willing to accept whatever Chelsea offer or Lyon offer or any other club might offer, does LJ start pushing? If she starts pushing, it becomes a little bit more difficult to keep a player around. I don't know whether she'll do that. It depends how much she wants that move. I always tend to feel when this kind of thing starts, sort of the precedent, be seeing the men's game, it always happens in the end, like whether it will be tomorrow, next week, next month, you sort of always feel like it will go through at some point. But yeah, look, United have to get the best. United are in a good position. They don't have to sell. They know they can get a lot for it. They can maybe try and bargain for a player coming the other way. But really, at the minute, all the eggs are kind of in United's basket in terms of LJ because she's under contract and a lot of players aren't. So the fact she's under contract means that at the moment, they hold the cards.
It's a good way of looking at it, isn't it? Because we're kind of resigned to the fact that we'll be losing her, but obviously only at a good price, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. Preston Heath then, so they come as a package, I guess. 3-4 months ago, I think the fan base was really optimistic that they would stay for another season. It is only optimistic, we never actually heard anything. Shortly after, it's kind of flipped completely on his head now when we were expecting them to stay in the States. Rich, did you ever kind of think that they was going to stay an extra bit of time? And if you did, what kind of went wrong? What's kind of shifted the mentality across the WSL now?
Yeah, I actually did for a while, to be honest, just because of their situation in the US, and I'm still interested to see how it plays out because obviously they've been drafted by, racing the new NWSL team. From everything that's been said, I don't think anyone really believes they're ever actually going to play for that team. But obviously you've got, if they do end up going to Angel City at the start of next year, which is obviously what a lot of people have speculated, well, you've still got, a fair chunk of the end. Of course, they're going to break off for the Olympics soon, and obviously, I'm sure Kristen will be at the Olympics. Tobin obviously injured, but when they come back, if they're not playing for Louisville, I'd be surprised if another NWSL club spent the money they'd have to spend just for the sake of getting them for a few months and then trading them off again, unless they thought they could trade for something really good at the end of this year from Angel City. But, you're talking probably money because Angel City don't have any players. It's a very complicated situation with the NWSL and their transfer system and the draft and everything like that. But so, yeah, I did think that. I thought maybe they will stay, maybe see out the first half of next season with United and then go back to the US in January. But like you say, I mean, nothing has been confirmed. But, I've seen some of Kristen Press's quotes on social media sort of talking about her time here now in the past tense, which probably says it all. So, yeah, I'm genuinely interested to see what they do. At the start, I always thought it would be for a year. I always did, all of them. Those two, Mewis, Lavelle, I always thought it would be a year. They'd go back for the Olympics and then go back to the NWSL once the world is back to some kind of normality, which we're getting to now. And obviously the NWSL season's kicked off and, they've got a good league, good season going over there. So, but yeah, where they actually end up playing their football post-Olympics, I'll be really interested because it does seem like they're not coming back here. So which NWSL club they play at, I think I'll be pretty interested to see what happens there. But overall, in terms of the year, I'm not shocked. And to be honest, it probably hasn't helped. Obviously Tobin being injured. Kristen took a little bit of time to get going, whereas Tobin kind of hit the ground running and was a massive loss, obviously, when she got injured. So those things probably haven't helped. The same with Rose Lavelle in terms of she's not really worked it into the Man City team, so she's probably probably wouldn't have been in a hurry to stay anyway. I think Mewis was obviously the one that had probably the biggest and most consistent impact over the 12 months. But no, I'm not hugely surprised that they're all going back. I always felt it was just going to be, we didn't have a league to play in last year, basically, so let's go to England and then we'll go back when things are back to normal.
Over 50 people watching, please hit the thumbs up and retweet it if you're watching on Twitter or whatever. It's a great in-depth show tonight. Nat, start off with yourself on this next one then. Jess Sigsworth. I never have to say the Heath and Press. The Heath and Press together is $250,000. That's the valuation on this particular Twitter site. So they're like $250,000 together. Jess Sigsworth, 30,000, as Rich said, out of contract. Jess, after 3 seasons, Nat?
Yeah, it's sad. Like that boot there, that's hers. Got a shirt here, hers. She's mine. My favourite player. What can you say? She's sort of encouraged me, can I say, to keep coming back. It's sad, but do I think it needs to be done? Yeah. And she'll think it. She never really played a lot. We've heard the rumours she's going to Leicester. I'm happy because I know that's a good club. I heard that Sheffield wanted her, sticking it on Rich's toes there. But yeah, she needs to play regularly. She needs to be full time. It's I'm happy for her and Jane Ross. They've not really played this season, and I've heard stuff about Jane Ross as well. No, she's not on that graphic, but I've heard about her leaving as well. If that's the case, that'll be a good move. It just leaves us, we sort of said, LJ, Ross, Preston Heath. So it sort of leaves us a bit loose up front. We definitely need like about 3 or 4 players because we've talked about 5 there. 5 of the 10 that's sort of being talked about. And in fact, a lot of them are forwards, so it's a lot of good forwards about, but the good forwards always either won Champions League or already seem to be moving. But in terms of just Jess, yeah, man, I love her, and I'll always love her, and I'll go and watch her, but it is what it is.
It is a massive shame. really is. I mean, part of me thought, well, even if she did stay, she could be like the fourth or even fifth choice striker just to keep her at the club. And she's versatile. She can still play on the wing and play up front. But it's not really what we have to resist. I think at the moment, if we do lose so many strikers, then especially if we do lose LJ and Ross and, like you say, Preston Heath, you know, to lose all five and just keep Fuso and Russo, I think is a risk. But it does look like it's happening anyway, so it's not really worth debating. But Rich, what are your thoughts on that potential move to Leicester?
Yeah, I think it's the right time for her to go. I don't think Sigsworth is a player of the level of a team that's going for Champions League football. I think there's a few at United, to be fair. Not many, but I think there's a few at United that sort of qualify under that category. I think Leicester would be good for her. You know, they're an up-and-coming team. They got some good young attacking players, you know, the likes of Flint and Bailey Gale and Lashante Paul, Charlie Devlin, etc. Probably need a little bit of experience, you know, that Siggy has around there, someone that can score goals. And I think somewhere like Leicester would actually be a really good place for her if that is what to happen. You know, I've heard that as well. So, yeah, I think it's the right time. You know, United have got to move on. Like you said, they originally built a squad for the Championship, and you know, you're now talking about Champions League. It's a big, big difference. You know, the players that were starring at that level, some have made that step up. You know, the younger ones that could still develop, but that's not really Jess Sigsworth. You know, she's kind of much more into her later 20s now. So, yeah, I think it's the right time for her to go, wherever it is. If it's Leicester, I think it'd be good for her. If it's I'm sure there'll be interest from elsewhere because she's a good player. But, yeah, I've heard Leicester as well. So it'd be a good move for her.
I'm glad it's Leicester as well, to be honest, absolutely. So I have two more names on the graphic. Amy Turner and Kirsty Smith, obviously two defenders. One for 30,000, one for 17,500. So it comes to around about just under $500,000 with those six names. Which Amy Turner, I'm guessing, the NWSL. Any kind of thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's a tough one because obviously Haz has gone out there to NC Courage. I think Amy is out of contract, but I think there's an option. I don't know whether that's the club's option or her option. I think she'd be a boss. You know, Amy probably never, you know, she did have a spell where she got into the England squad. I think she played 2 or 3 games, but never. She had a few injuries. You know, she moved about a bit. She was at Notts County. Obviously, they folded. She ended up at Liverpool in what was a pretty, you know, turbulent time for Liverpool. And then obviously dropped down to the Championship. And as Nat kind of said earlier, probably just missed the boat a little bit, you know, with England in terms of being an England regular. I think she's 30 next month as well. So you don't see too many players break into their international squad once they've gone into their 30s. So I think for Amy, it's just going to come down to a personal decision. But at the end of the day, you know, you can want to go to the NWSL, but you have to have an NWSL club that wants to sign you as well. And she might have that. You know, I think she'd be valuable for some teams out there. I haven't heard anything. I'll be honest. I haven't heard anything linking her with a move away. That's not to say it's not happening. There'll be things going on all the time. As much as I'd love to be able to speak to every single agent in the game, it is not possible. So, yeah, I think it'd be a big loss. It would be, but I wouldn't say with any certainty that it's going to happen at the moment. I haven't heard any murmurs, so we'll see. We'll see with that. But, yeah, I think she would be a big loss.
Amy Turner, it's like what we said about Millie. Millie's probably not been at the standard, whereas I think Amy T has just risen. You know, her standards have been rising each year. I think when Abby McManus came in, Amy Turner probably thought, you know, Abby thought, I'm cementing this place, but Amy Turner fought back, got her centre-back place back with Millie. And to be honest, I think she's been our, you know, best defender this season, you know, alongside Honor. And, you know, it would be a big loss. She has got another year. I think the option is the club option. But, you know, what is she thinking? Like you said, it's personal. Does she just... I think whoever is the manager needs to work to keep her because, you know, just got Maria in. Like you said, Amy is that sort of Man United rock. Vicky's sort of saying she'd be a good help to the new manager. I saw a comment before from John, and Dal Kemper is looking like she might go back to the Courage. So there's a lot of rumours and that. And so where would then Amy go? She wouldn't be playing with Haz. And then I think we sort of talked to Marty before, and the nearest club is like Orlando or something. That's like 6 hours on a flight. I mean, I know they've lived far anyway, but you know, is it worth doing it when it's 6 hours? You know, or is it just worth sticking it out at United? In terms of Smithy, I think Smithy's contract, like, they've not offered her a new one. The new manager might come in and change his mind. But in terms of Amy, out of all them, you even talking about Lauren and Preston Heath, Amy would be the one for me that we should be fighting, that we could keep, and we should be fighting to make sure that we do keep her, even if it's just another 1 year or 1 year and an option again. Craig's in there, can only have 4 international players. I think it's just a rumour that's come up because Haz has gone over. And then obviously now this Casey stuff has happened. We've not heard that she signed a new deal, or they've not heard that she's extended it. But that would be a big worry for me because she's been our best centre-back. Even though we brought in Maria, I think she's still been better than Maria. So I'd like to see Amy and Maria maybe. You know, and then it's just another player that we need to bring in, another new centre-back that has to adapt. Whereas Amy could guide maybe Millie a bit more.
This is where I'm thinking that Curtis Smith might still stay, because you got Abby McManus that just wasn't mentioned on the graphic, but likely to go. Obviously, we just mentioned Amy Turner, Martha Harris, who's also rumoured to be going. If you get Curtis Smith as well, that's 4 defenders plus 4 attackers. That's 8. Just a lot of work to do in the summer there, and 2 fullbacks going, you're leaving Honor. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's to move the club forward potentially. I think it would be maybe all these players do need to go and bring better players in, but all in one summer. I mean, that's kind of just what I wanted to ask you there. Is it feasible that we can almost remove between 8 and 10 players and get maybe 6 to 8 players in and promote a couple of devs maybe? But that's a massive turnaround, isn't it, for such a big club?
Yeah, I'd be really surprised if that happened. You do see it further down the leagues, and we've seen it already this summer. I think 8 must have been about the average for most clubs at the moment in terms of the release list that we've seen in the last week or two. I'd be very surprised if it's as high as that for United. I think you're right. Players like Kirsty Smith, I'd want to keep them around as squad players, definitely. I think with United, there's a few players that maybe are more than squad players that probably shouldn't be. I think they're very solid squad players, and they're the kind of players that you need in there. But again, it's whether a player wants to stay. You know, you can go to Kirsty Smith and say, look, we're going to offer you a new contract, but you might not play that much next season. It's not a huge selling point for a player. Do you know what I mean? To say, you're probably going to be on the bench quite a bit because we might be bringing so-and-so in, or, this player's actually staying or whatever. Some players, they're happy to be involved. They're happy to be at a top club and to fight for that place and, to train with top players and whatnot. So, yeah, I'd be trying to keep someone like Kirsty around. I do think Amy will stay. Like Craig said, a lot of teams have their international spots now, and it's not a definite thing. But like I said, I've not heard anything. But yeah, with Kirsty, I'd be trying to keep Kirsty around. I don't think she's the kind of player that you'd be starting every week now if you were trying to push on for the Champions League. But I would, I'd be offering her a new contract. But at the end of the day, it's whether a player wants to stay. I'm not sure if there was an option in Kirsty's contract. But yeah, it'd be. I think she'd be a sensible one to keep around.
So moving on to the ins, we'll start at the top. Lots of people have been asking about the manager first coming in. What type of managers do you think that we need, Rich, as opposed to just names? If you want to give names on who you think would be a good manager for the club, great. But what type of manager could you see coming in over the summer?
I think for me, I'd be looking at not a young manager per se, but like one of the up and comers, I would say. Like, maybe the ones that play. They've got the experience, a little bit of experience, but play the sort of good football. Because United have got good players to do it. You can play that kind of football with Russo and Galton and Hansen. You've got pure pace, you've got skill. You get that number 9 that can finish. Like I said, I rate the midfield. I really do. I think maybe it's potentially a player short from being, top midfield. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I've spoke to people that have sort of suggested United are kind of casting the net wide. They're not rushing it. They don't just want to go out and say, okay, this person's based in England, they're available, we'll get them. I think they're looking. I'm not saying they will hire a foreign manager, but I think they're willing to look at the best options. There's some very good managers abroad. I know Nat obviously is in love with Levante and their manager. But I mean, that's a difficult one because she's got a great team and they're in the Champions League and they're flying at the moment. I don't know what her English is like, but as someone like that, one of the up and coming managers that plays good football, that can play, cliched, and I hate saying this after watching them bore the pants off me and stress me out for 120 minutes last night, but play the United way. And I think that's what you need to look for. There's a lot of managers available, but I've seen people on social media say, Jean-Luc Vasseur and Rita Guarino and people like that. But just because managers are available doesn't always mean you should go for them. I'm always skeptical of Leon managers because they go out and they hire like the most random people that you've never heard of that have never managed in the women's game, but they win because they have the best squad in the world. And obviously they haven't actually even won this season. They might not even win the league, but we'll find out about that probably this weekend. So yeah, I think Rita Guarino would be a good one. Obviously she just left Juventus. She's done a great job there. Very, very good coach. Really esteemed in the women's game. She was an absolute top player back in the day. But again, I'm speculating. I haven't heard anything. But the little bits I've heard suggest to me United are not necessarily rushing it. They are, going as far and wide as they have to find the right person for the job, whether that be a British manager or a foreign manager. But it's a bit, people will be queuing up for that job. It's Manchester United at the end of the day. There will be a lot of people who want that job. So I think they're right to not rush into it.
But would they be queuing up, Rich, when they hear about the situation that Casey was in and why Casey resigned? I saw an article for the Daily Mail that said, yeah, the Man United job's available, Manchester United, but they were queuing for toilets. And I know me and you have had a chat about this, but there was no toilets, there was no gym, there was no this. There's still uncertainty about where they're going to train next year. We can't be going back to Lee. Cliff is the building's derelict, written off by health and safety. There's nowhere to go unless with our owners, unless they're funding millions of pounds to expand it out and put a new building on the other side for the women, and then the women come in one angle and the men come in one angle. But will a top manager, then you've talked about that Juventus one, and apparently she was going to go to Italy national team, but she's not. And then Fiorentina are looking at her, apparently. That's what I've heard recently from Soccer Donna. But no, she would be someone I'd look at. Again, Levante one that you said, Maria Pry. I'd look at someone like that. I want a foreign manager now. And the only English manager I wanted was Wardy. Wardy's gone Villa now. It's probably best for her. But that Gerard Piqué, apparently he started all the dynasty for Leon and was bringing through young players, was bringing through good players. I'd get... I'm fed up with English this, English that. There's more to the world than just England. And I think, I saw a journalist say, oh, it's great that Everton are looking at players across, there's more to even the world than Europe, and I think if we can get, Craig said it, Pierce, so I can't even say her name, from Brazil, look at someone there, look at the Tigres, because they're South African, they're winning the league a lot, look at someone there. I see Amy saying, do we know who's doing the look-in? Mercer? Yeah, it's likely to be him. But it worries me that it's him. I do like him. I think he's a nice guy personally. But how much does he know about women's football? I think they landed on their feet with Casey. I think she blew them away. I think it was simple. I think it was easy with Casey. We know the history of selecting managers. Let's go and get a shining star, this and that. Louis van Gaal, let's go and get this. And then Jose's one. And now they've brought back... Now they brought back Ollie, and even he's getting stick, and they're not backing him apparently. But I don't know. It's hard. What's your thoughts then on what I've just said, Rich?
I think there's a couple of things. I think with the facility situation, obviously this has rumbled on with a lot of clubs this season. There's been things said about Arsenal. Obviously, there was a lot said about Birmingham City, and obviously the stuff about United. I think there's two sides to it, and it's not knowing the sort of specific details because, people on the inside, know a lot more than we do. How much of it is down to COVID and how much of it isn't. They need a permanent training base, that's for sure. Whether that be Lee, Carrington, wherever, the Cliff, somewhere completely different. That needs to be put in place because every club has a permanent training base. We have a permanent training base at Sheffield United and we're part-time in the Championship. So that needs to be sorted. But, I've heard a lot about, toilets and gyms. And obviously there was the situation with Chelsea against Bayern Munich and Bayern Munich being, getting changed in a bar and things like that. But so much, I've lived through that this year in the Championship. I've been to so many different grounds, both our ground and away grounds, where you are doing that. You are stuck with temporary toilets because you can't use the normal ones because they're too close to where the other team get changed, or you can't use a changing room because it's too close to where the other team get. It's the same at the training. We haven't used our changing rooms at the training ground since pre-COVID. Our girls, they come in their training gear, they sit in their cars, and then they go on the training pitch. And then when they've trained, they get back in their cars and they go home. They don't use the showers. They don't use not because we don't have them, but they can't because of our COVID protocols in terms of going in the building, because you have first team staff in, you've got academy staff in, and, bubbles are being made. It's a nightmare, quite frankly. But every club's going through that. So, when I hear about, temporary toilets and, having to walk to Portaloos and things like that, it's not ideal, but I'd wager that's down to the COVID situation because every club, we went to Liverpool. Liverpool want the biggest team in the Championship and they've got one of the biggest stadiums in Prenton Park. We were getting changed in the stadium bar before the game and it was fine, to be fair, because it was quite big. But we had to do that because, we couldn't go in the changing room because you're sharing then the tunnel. We went to Aston Villa, who play at a football league ground in the Conti Cup, and we were in a room at completely the other side of the stadium because we couldn't share the tunnel. We couldn't have players walking up and down the tunnel, together mixing bubbles. So I'm hoping all that's gone next season. I'm hoping it's all a bit more settled for clubs in terms of both training and match facilities. But I do think a lot of what we've heard, and I'm sure there are issues at clubs. I'm sure there are issues with, poor facilities or substandard, standards and things like that, because the game is still growing. But I think we need to decipher kind of what is down to poor facilities and poor funding from the clubs, and what is actually down to the temporary situation that we're all in with COVID. And I think on the negotiation side, I do think it is John that's leading a lot of it at the moment. It's interesting. I spoke to some agents who sort of say they've probably had quite a bit of dialogue with John since Casey left, which is interesting. I think it seems like he's kind of now taken over that. And like I said, I think they are trying to cast the net wide. And I think John is doing that because, as Nat says, he's not got a huge women's football background, but I'd be encouraged by the fact that I have heard that he is reaching out to people within the game. He's reaching out to agents about managers, about players, not because they're dead, not because they're scrambling around just taking anybody, but they want to make sure they get the right person and they don't want to miss out on someone that maybe he wouldn't be aware of coming from the men's game. I think Arsenal are doing the same. I think Arsenal are a little bit more ahead of the game because they could plan in advance that Joe was leaving, whereas obviously Casey came a bit more out of the blue. But yeah, I think United are well on with what they're doing. I wouldn't be panicking. Like I said, their signings last year were announced quite late. I think Stan was the first one, and she was, I think, start to middle of July, and then they came quite quickly after that. But they will have everything in place. I guarantee it. A club, even at Sheffield United, we've got a list of players for each position. If somebody leaves, this is who comes in. If we can't get there, they come in, and we're part time. So I'm pretty certain Man United will have a pretty thorough process in place for what's going on. I get it's frustrating for fans. They want to know, they want to hear what's going on, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that never gets said, never gets written about, because we don't find out. It's just going on a day-to-day basis. I guarantee they're talking about the manager and signings and departures every single day, because that's what's going on now at every single club. And then when they're ready, they'll announce.
I wanted to just touch on a few things you said there. You said how much is down to COVID. Well, when we first started, they were promised their own training base, and all they got was Lee. So I think, yes, COVID is what's brought it on now, but I think it's a frustration that's probably built up and probably been told this is what's going to happen, this and that. And obviously, we all know about these owners and the lack of investment in all parts of the club. So I'm not going to... It's good to hear what you said about John. I do like him as a person. I know some people are saying this and that, and he's the reason why Nicky Butt left and this and that. I do think there is potentially some issues about the women's team. Obviously they brought it out, so you would think they'd brought it back, put even more effort into it. And I think, we've had Emma on, and she sort of talked about maybe they thought Man United and they just sort of, it would be easy. And I think we've seen with Chelsea spending about £4 million and to get humiliated by Barcelona. I think that's the level, and I think they didn't think. I think they thought, a couple of mil at a start, and then we'll get there because we're Man United. And I think that's how they carry themselves, these owners. We're Man United, so of course we can get there. And that's just what makes me question. I think a lot of I don't know. There's a lot of bluster about with this club currently at the minute, and I don't like it. And I don't like it, especially in the women's team, when they promise so much and they've not delivered. And then obviously she's walked away. But the only thing I will say as well, she told them a couple of months before she was going to walk away. So if they weren't looking then, I don't understand why they're just looking now, thinking, it's all right, she won't go. I just think, and then she has gone. And so I spoke to someone the other day and said maybe she backed herself into a corner. Maybe she did, but it's either going to be the best thing or the worst thing. It's either going to lead us, like we said at the start, down just a spiral path, or the new person's going to come in. They're actually going to put time and effort into it. They're going to put money in that they need to put in. We shouldn't be the lowest. When she talks about budget, we should have a big budget. There's talk of Everton. I'm going to name some players for you now, Rich. Anna Avergaard from a Swedish team, don't even know where, but she's a top scorer for Sweden. And there's talk of City and Everton are competing for her. And I look at players like that and I think, why aren't Man United? I mean, have you heard anything about her, or what kind of signing do you think she would be if she did go City or Everton?
Anna's an interesting one because she's a very good player. She's been injured most of this year, which sort of surprises me a little bit that they would be so heavily linked. The other two I read last week, Natalie Bjorn and Hannah Bennison, didn't surprise me that much. Everton need a fullback. Danielle Turner's having sort of endless injury issues at the moment, and obviously Ingrid Movold has retired. So Hannah Bennison's one of the sort of top young players in the game. I think Everton would be a good step because she'd probably play, but again, it's all rumours. The Swedish league's a summer league, so those players are under contract. So Everton will have to spend some money. They've done it in the past. They spent quite a lot on Govan last year. Everton have got, Everton want to be up there. They want to be up where United are pushing that top three. They didn't get there this year. It's going to be a slow process because there's a big gap. They were down the relegation end of the league a few years ago. So it's going to take a lot of work. I think they got sort of halfway, maybe there last year in terms of they probably got a few players in key positions, but they probably still lacked a little bit of quality in certain areas. But yeah, it'd be interesting. I think Everton are ones to watch. They're willing to spend money. They're not going to blow teams out of the water. They're not going to compete with City and Arsenal and Chelsea in terms of what they can offer. I don't think overall in terms of, they could go out and do what they did with Govan 4 or 5 times over. I'm not sure they could. But they're willing to do it, and they're looking for good players. So it's good for them. Everton have had a rich history in the women's game. They were a top side before they dropped away for a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
They're more ambitious, it feels like, sort of, because like you just said, Hannah Bennison, she's a top up-and-coming player. Anna, that's a player that a lot of fans who are dedicated like me have been watching for a while. And then it sort of feels like I've heard Aslani might be going to Juventus. I've heard Juventus might be signing a couple of other players. And the players that Hannah Badeja from the Malta, she's 17. She's got 12 goals. I don't know if you know her, Rich. But, it seems like these other teams are... I don't know, you say they're doing things United, but have you heard anything of United? Because we were all excited, me and John, waiting... I think in the February we heard about Borussia a bit, and I think that might be done. But then since that, nothing. And then Casey's left, and then we're hearing about Tobin and all these might not stay, and then LJ might not stay, and then we're hearing the good players that we actually like and want to sign, and we're hearing Everton are signing them. Who have you heard for United? Maybe.
United are notoriously a very difficult team to hear things about. They kind of keep things very in-house, which, to be fair, as frustrating as that can be for fans, and it can be frustrating for journalists, it's probably the way to go about it. I always think when everybody sort of knows what you're doing, you're probably doing it wrong. I don't think it should be leaking all over the place. And United particularly, the first season was very different. Like, I think every man and his dog had kind of pieced together what their squad... I mean, I'd actually written a profile article because I was so confident. I knew the 21 players they were signing, that was ready to go when they announced it. Last season it was very quiet. The Staniforth rumours were there, the Badia rumours were there from Spain, but Fuso kind of came out of nowhere. I heard about that, I think, only like less than 24 hours in advance. And they do keep things quiet. I haven't heard anything concrete. I've spoken to people who think United have one or two. The word they used was committed. They didn't say signed or anything like that, but things agreed and in place. And I haven't heard concretely Borussia, but obviously her name has been mentioned a lot, and obviously she is generally available. In terms of leaving her last team at the end of last year, I think it'd be a good signing. But it doesn't surprise me because, like you said, there are going to be players leaving United, and they will have had these lists of targets drawn up for months now, and they'll be acting on it. They can't afford to not do. They can't afford to wait until the manager comes in. You look at Arsenal. Manaru Ibuchi was so a Joe Montemuro signing. He'd been after her for so long, and even though he's not there, they've signed her because you've got to move on. You've got to progress, and she's a very good signing. I can't see a manager coming into Arsenal saying, I don't want Manaru Ibuchi because she's a superb player. So at the end of the day, if you're signing good players, any manager is going to want them. And at the end of the day, you're inheriting someone else's squad anyway. You're inheriting Casey Stoney's squad. So if there's one or two added in there, new signings, what's the difference, really? There's no difference. They're inheriting... Whether it's 14, 15, 16, 17 players, whatever, they're inheriting a squad that's not theirs. So if you do sign one or two before they come in, it doesn't make a difference because whilst they're not their signings, neither are the other 17 or 18 that are there anyway. So I don't really buy into the whole nothing will happen whilst the manager's being decided. You can't afford to do that. There will be things going on. I'm sure Birmingham are doing the same. I'm sure Arsenal are doing the same. I'm sure Juventus are doing the same, etc. So yeah, I've heard maybe one or two things are kind of tied up, but like I said, United generally keep things very quiet, and they will announce when they want to.
Okay, so I've heard the same, and like say Borisa, but who else would you say? Like what forwards do you think then, Rich? Because that's obviously an area where we need, and then maybe full back. But we've said a lot, and I know I'm speaking over John a lot. But like, what forwards would you say? Go on, John, as well.
No, I was going to say, I guess the question would be more like along the lines of who's available, who's out of contract, who's likely to come to England, who's likely to move up to Manchester with them, somewhere else in the country. I suppose more along them lines, I guess.
It's very tough because, I mean, someone can come out of nowhere. You know, Ivana Fuso, for example, you know, I don't think a lot of people even really knew who she was. When she came in last year, it's tough. I mean, you want someone who's proven. You know, a lot of people scoff at, you know, Paris and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I don't think she's maybe where she was a couple of years ago, but she's still the third top scorer in the WSL history. And that's not bad considering she's not been here for a few years. And I don't think she played in it for the first 3 years either, when she was basically a kid, before she came through at Everton and then joined City. I think she's better than what United have, or what United are going to be left with once the Americans go back. I think she'd slot into that number. She's pacey as well, and I think she would suit playing with Leslie and Leah. But look, I haven't heard anything about that. There's so many strikers out there. There are hundreds of strikers, and I'm sure many of them would kill to play for Man United. If you're looking domestically, I'm not sure. To be honest, I don't think there's many. I don't look at many strikers down the WSL and say, you know, I think they're ready for the step up. Ironically, the one that probably was the one that got let go and has now gone to America. I don't think I need to tell Nat her name. But yeah, look, there'll be a strike. They will find someone. They will find someone that has the profile, whether it's from France. Obviously, you know, Khadija Shaw is the hot property in terms of what everybody wants her. Whether that's American teams, English teams, the big two in France, you know, they're all after her. So, you know, that's always going to be a difficult one for someone to do. Obviously, she's been pretty heavily linked with Man City. I don't think there's really been any update on that, to be honest. I don't know why. I mean, I know
an update.
She's got all the options. Go on
then. Washington Spirit apparently have matched City's offer.
Yeah, I read that, but the feeling I get from America is they think she's going to England or to Europe at least. But I think, you know, they're not in a, you know, again, they hold all the cards with that. She's got all the options in the world because she's one of the top young forwards. She's out of contract. She can go anywhere. They don't need to decide quickly. And I think what people forget is, you know, we're sat talking now. It's the 27th of May. And I know it feels like a lot has happened, but the transfer window doesn't even actually open for 2 more weeks. And it's open for 3 months. You know, so we are so remarkably early in the transfer window. It's not even open. And I know it feels like, but that generally happens. You get this sort of rush where there's a few things that are done early that get announced. Then you start getting the release lists. And then you'll probably have a bit of a lull where nothing really happens, where teams are now really starting to suss out what they want to do. They know who's available. They know who's been released. They know who's under contract. And then you'll probably, I think once the window opens in June, you'll start to see a lot more. Because even the last couple of days has been quieter. You know, there was the mad rush last week where things were getting announced all over the place. And then it's just settled down a little bit this week. And I think it'll probably settle down again a little bit more next week now that teams start to know where they're at and what they need. It's just patience. I know fans are not patient. I get that. You know, fans want to know everything, not just Man United fans, fans around the world. But your clubs, they will be doing things. They will be after players every single day. Trust me, during the summer, it's basically all that dominates a football club. And like I said, I know that because I work in one. So there will be things going on. Yeah, they need a striker. I really think they do need a striker. Whether that is Anna Anvegard, Bunny Shaw, Keita Paris, whoever, there'll be someone out there, and they'll find the right person that they want. And it's like anything, you piece it together. At some point it will start to leak. There'll be names mentioned as things get more concrete. And like I said, it's a long summer. By the time it closes on, I think it's September the 2nd. That's over 3 months away. So there's so much to happen before then.
Tash Downey. Yeah. I just think there's a level, and there's a level where we want to be at. And I think players like, I don't know what Rich can talk after, but there's players like Tash, Natasha Downey, Jane Ross, Nikita Paris. They're all in that kind of bracket. I wouldn't say they're all in the same line. I'd say Jane Ross is there, Tash Downey might be a bit there, and Nikita Paris might be a bit more up, but they're all in the same bracket. Whereas for me, then I hear Bunny Shaw, Anna Evergard, Esther, who's banging goals for to be honest, she only just started it, but I hear those kind of names, and they're in that level. Sam Kerr, Bunny, Harder. That's the level that we need to be at. And then there's talk that Viv might be going to Leon, but apparently now she's staying. But we need a striker like Kerr, Bunny, Harder, not just Jane Ross upgrade kind of thing. Just want to know where Rich's point on that.
I think you want to obviously get the best that you can. I think, it's a catch-22 because they're still such a new club. It is hard to attract the Sam Kerrs, the Pernille Harders, etc., because more established clubs with more money and Champions League football and trophies will come and get them first. But you need to just get that one. You need to find that one. And if you find that one that commits, that takes you to another level, you get more. And that's what happened with Chelsea. Chelsea signed a lot of players in the early days. Some worked, some didn't. The ones that didn't went, and they bought new ones. And they just gradually pieced it together. It didn't happen overnight. It took Man City 3 years to win the league. It's difficult. It is very difficult because, you're not going to get the Sam Kerrs now. You're going to have to look a level down because Sam Kerr's at Chelsea and probably not leaving there anytime soon. Miedemar, for example, realistically is not going to happen if you're a Man United. So it's where do you find the next Miedemar? Where do you find the next Sam Kerr, the player that can become that? But you have to grow with them. You've got, and I've always described her as a generational talent in Lauren James. And look, she might be going for other reasons, whether it's homesickness or whatever. But if you don't grow with those players, they will go. And then you sort of back to square one a little bit. I think Khadija Shaw is, that one that everybody wants because I think they know she's going to be that next one. But again, you've got all the established teams in the world, not just the English clubs, the Lyons, the PSGs. They're all looking at her. And if you're Man United, it's still hard at this stage to compete with that. So you've got to be very shrewd about what you're doing. If you do buy a striker, can you find someone close to that level, but maybe someone that people don't know as much about? It's very difficult. It is really difficult to do. And that's why you've got to be good at your job in terms of doing the recruitment.
Bunny, they should throw money at her. Throw money at her. Just throw it. They've got it. Throw it. That's how good she is.
We have been going for around 20 minutes, so Rich, thank you for staying over just that little bit longer. Thank you to everybody in the comments. We are going to wrap it up now. We'll have to get you back on nearer the time, like during the transfer window, just so I can discuss it a little bit longer, because this could have gone on for another 2 hours talking about this. But no, thank you, Rich. We really appreciate you coming on. Plan for the rest of the week for this channel. So we've got a show tomorrow night with myself and a few others, the Friday Night Fan Forum. That'll be on our women's football channel and not the main account, the women's account. Saturday, we've got the Ben and Matt show, which is live I think that'll be at 8 o'clock. And then we've got another action-packed live week. Next week, I think there'll be 5 shows on next week as well. So please stay tuned to this account and our brand new women's football account as well. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Nat, thank you for joining me. Rich, thank you again. Thank you for in the comments. See you guys.
Not a problem, guys.